We are in a series right now called Longings, and today we're talking about joy. So the question I want to start, just if I open it up this way, is this one. If you are chasing joy, if you're chasing it, I like the terminology, if you're chasing it, where would you look for it? Do you have a spot that comes to mind? Do you have a place? Do you have a location? Is it warm? Is it indoors? Is it outdoors? Are there people there? Or anybody else like me? Are you by yourself? Anybody? If you're chasing joy, where would you look for it? I want to share just a little taste of maybe my happy place, and I want to show you this short video clip. Check this out. Anybody else? Yes? Those of us that are raising our hands, we could watch that for the next half hour and be totally content. And I was tempted all week just to play that video. That right there is my happy place. I like hunting. I started hunting about 10 years ago. And for me, at the beginning, it's fun and it's exciting. Like, what am I going to see? And getting out the woods. And you wake up early and you get all bundled up. And what's funny about even this weather in Michigan, if you're a hunter, is you try to bundle up and you try to stay warm. But if you get too warm, then you sweat and the deer can smell the sweat. And so then you're trying to walk out quietly and carefully. And you kind of go through this whole process just to get out to a bucket. And you sit on a bucket in the woods for like 4 hours. Does that move anybody's heart like it does mine? Okay, like 3 of us. Okay, the rest of you, I'm sorry for wasting your time on this illustration. I could show like an Apple store for you next time. We could show like a video clip of the Apple store or a library or a coffee shop. If you were chasing joy, where would you go? For me, joy is often found like running through and prancing through the woods. If I'm gonna go through all the hassle, if I'm gonna wake up early, if I'm gonna bundle up and get to my tree stand and navigate through the woods in the dark, trying to be quiet by myself, if I'm gonna go do all of that, what do I need to see? Okay, I'll help you for your non-outdoorsy crowd. We got to warm up today. Deer, 4 legs. They're kind of tall. They're brown. They prance through the woods. They don't like people. That's what I want to see. I want to go out. I want to see a deer. I don't have to shoot anything. I don't have to catch anything. I know a lot of non-hunters say you go catch deer. You don't catch deer. I can explain that later if you want, because I feel like I'm explaining way more of this illustration than I planned on. Getting frustrated. For me, joy is found in the woods, and if I can see something, if I go home with something, it's found. But joy is kind of like a deer, and I'll just land this because I feel like it needs to end. Joy, to me, is like a deer because sometimes it feels elusive. Can anybody else relate to that? Sometimes you do all the right stuff. Sometimes you have the right conversations, or you have the right job, or you make the right moves financially, or you do the right things physically, or the right things relationally. Sometimes you do all the right stuff, and you get to the spot, and you expect that joy is going to be a byproduct of doing all the right things, and then it doesn't show up, does it? I mean, think about this. We just had Thanksgiving, okay? So you start to add extended family gatherings. You go, I'm going to set this all up. It's going to be nice. We're going to make dinner. We're all going to sit down. We're going to have a conversation, and we're not going to talk about politics. And then somebody says something, don't they? And you go, joy. It just got out of reach again. Or you're doing all the right things, and you finally get to the spot in life where you go, I can actually take a retirement. I can take it earlier. I'm ready to offboard, and I've got my whole plan and dream and idea of this is what I want to do. And then you're handed a diagnosis that pulls it right out from under you. And you go, joy just got a little bit harder to get. Or you get everything that you've been working for in life. It could be the house, it could be the job, it could be the retirement or the funds, whatever. You get all of that, and then a recession hits, and you go, joy is elusive. As I was working on this message today, joy is elusive. Oftentimes what we do is we bounce thing to thing, person to person, relationship to relationship, stuff to stuff, house to house, person to person, whatever it may be, church to church even. We bounce looking for this thing called joy, even if many of us wouldn't articulate it that way. That joy is actually this deep longing in all of our hearts, and oftentimes we chase the wrong things, hoping to get it as a byproduct. And when we don't, we're almost left in a worse spot. And it replays over and over and over again. So if I asked you a question here before we open up the text, the question would be this: where are you looking for joy right now? If you had to write it down, if you had to put it in your phone, or if you had to answer to the person next to you, and if you just said, here's where I'm looking for joy right now, chances are it's on the horizon. It's getting close. You're looking for something, or you're watching something, or you're checking something, or you've got a goal in mind. What is that? What is it for you? The character we're looking at today in the Christmas story is a man named Zechariah. He was a priest in the division of Abijah. He was serving in the temple of Jerusalem. So he was a priest. He was part of the priestly line. And what they would do is they would minister in the temple. In each line, I think there were 24 different priestly lines. Each of them would serve 2 different weeks of the year. And so Zechariah was serving in the temple, and Zechariah drew, basically it's called casting lots. He drew the lucky straw that he got to make the specific special offering that was made once a year before God. And so he went into the temple. He went into that Holy of Holies, the special consecrated sacred part. He went in, and he was the only person in the entire nation to get chosen for such a duty. And so he does that, and you would think, wow, what a joyous experience and how awesome. But Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth had something attached to them that I honestly think robbed them of joy for decades. It was the fact that they could not have children. It was infertility. They were childless. And what the Bible describes them as is they were righteous before God, but they were childless and advanced in years. It was the thing that they wanted, and it was the thing that they desired, and it was the thing that they had hoped for, and it was a series of monthly disappointments, decade after decade after decade after decade. And so here's Zechariah, and Zechariah gets a once-in-a-lifetime or once-in-many lifetimes opportunity. And he goes in to make the sacrifice, and this happens. It says this, Luke chapter 1, verse 11, while Zechariah was in the sanctuary, an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing to the right of the incense altar. Zechariah was shaken and overwhelmed with fear when he saw him, but the angel said, don't be afraid, Zechariah. God has heard your prayer. Your wife Elizabeth will give you a son, and you are to name him John. You will have great, just say it with me, joy. The angel shows up. The angel's got good news. I think the angel's excited to share this with him. You will have great joy and gladness, and many will rejoice. There's another variation of joy. Many will rejoice at his birth, for he will be great in the eyes of the Lord. You will have great joy. But Zechariah says, not so fast. This is his response, verse 11. He said to the angel, how can I be sure this will happen? I'm an old man now, and my wife is also well along in years. Don't you like how he packaged that? He says, I'm old, but she's not. I've learned not to say that. She's just well along. It was a good answer. I thought, good answer, yes. Zechariah's response to the angel is, dude, we played this game. We lived this life. We've pursued this year after year after year, decade after decade. This is not in the cards for us. How can I know that this can happen? I mean, if we're even talking physically here, he's going, I don't see it. I don't understand. And the angel's response to him is actually quite swift. Zechariah pushes back, and the angel rebukes him and basically says, because you questioned this, because you questioned the word of the Lord that I showed up to give you, because you questioned this, you're not going to speak now until the child is born. It's a pretty interesting punishment or rebuke or consequence or whatever. It's pretty interesting. So Zechariah, it says he leaves the temple and he goes back to the people and he's trying to make gestures and communicate, but he can't talk. He can't use his mouth. And so the people finally understand he saw something. He saw a vision inside that temple. God gave him something. And then he went back home to his wife, and we don't hear much about Zechariah again until 9 or 10 months later when that baby is born and Zechariah can speak again. This is really interesting demonstration of a desire for joy, and then even when it was offered, it seems like it eludes him yet again. But this is also interesting. His wife had a totally different response. 6 months after this opportunity or this conversation in the temple, when the angel speaks to Zechariah, an angel shows up to Mary. You've heard that story before. The angel shows up to Mary and he says, bring you good news. You're going to have God's son. You're going to call him Jesus. The angel shows up and says that to Mary, and Mary is moved, and it says she was even moved to a song because a couple verses later in verse 39, she goes out to see Zechariah and Elizabeth. It says this, a few days later, Mary hurried to the hill country of Judea to the town where Zechariah lived. She entered the house and greeted Elizabeth. At the sound of Mary's greeting, Elizabeth's child, so that's John the Baptist. He's within Elizabeth, Zechariah's son. Elizabeth's child leaped within her, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. Elizabeth gave a glad cry and exclaimed to Mary, God has blessed you above all women, and your child is blessed. Verse 43, why am I so honored that the mother of my Lord should visit me? When I heard your greeting, the baby in my womb jumped for joy. You are blessed because you believed that the Lord would do what he said. It's crazy how much the word joy is used in the Bible. I didn't know. I mean, just like so many sermons, I didn't know until I started studying it. The word joy is used 165 times from Genesis to Revelation. You know what's interesting about joy, and even stories like this one all throughout the Bible, is they're often attached to the person of Jesus. It's often not in circumstances, it's often not in things going right or bad things not happening. In fact, the word joy is mostly used in relationship or in connection to the person of Jesus, including this. Mary shows up with Jesus in her womb, and it's like this weird thing between the babies where they can sense like Jesus enters into the equation, and he enters into the room, and he enters into the family, and he enters into the home. Jesus shows up, and the byproduct is joy, which is totally upside down and totally different than how most of us see joy. What most of us see joy, or how we think about joy, is that if the right circumstances take place and if the right things happen and if everything falls into plan and everything goes well according to the way that I see or desire it to go, when it meets my expectations, then the result is joy. And most of us will carve years or decades or our entire lives working towards the end that we think we will actually experience ultimate joy. But rarely that's how joy is talked about in the Bible. Joy is often talked about when Jesus enters into the room or into the equation. When Jesus shows up, there is an attachment to joy. So here's just a question. What if true joy is only found in pursuing Jesus? What if the thing that many of us are chasing isn't joy? Maybe it's happiness. Happiness seems to be attached to circumstances, but joy seems different, doesn't it? Joy seems like it can permeate beyond circumstances. I went to Haiti as a high schooler. You've heard me talk about this before. In fact, one of our partnerships that we have here at Frontline is called Ebenezer Discipleship Training Center. I went, I don't even know, 15, 17, 18 years ago, something like that. I went to Haiti. It was 6 months after an earthquake. It had brought a country that was already impoverished to its knees. And I showed up, just like Danielle was sharing, I showed up thinking, we're here to fix stuff, we're here to do stuff, we're here to build stuff. And our leader sat us down on the first night, and her name was Linda, and she said, hey, a lot of you probably have the American mindset of we're here to do and to fix and to build. But she said, the only thing that we're gonna build is relationships. And she said, for this reason, look around. And you see the rubble all over the place and buildings that had totally collapsed and roads that had to be reworked. And you see like the sewer system that's flowing into the street. And you see the jimmy-rigged power lines all over. She said, everything that is built here continues to fall apart. You can build a house and it only takes one earthquake and that thing falls apart again. Or you could bring electric to somebody's home or to a business, but eventually that electric's gonna get shut off because they have a bad grid system. Or you can bring food and you can feed somebody for a day, but the next day they're going to be hungry. But she said, but a relationship that you can build with them can actually span forever. And in a relationship with Jesus can change eternity. So that's what we're here to do. I remember being so confused when I was there because I started walking through all of these different communities. We would pass whole tent communities. They called them tent cities, where you would see like a normal 4-person Coleman tent. You'd see 500 of them all laid out next to each other like a checkerboard up on a hillside. And so we passed tent city after tent city and building in rubble and ruins over and over and over. We saw all these, and here's why it bothered me so much. The people in Haiti to this day are the happiest people, the most joyful people that I've ever met in my entire life. I've been to the Middle East. I've been to different parts of Europe. I've been all around the States. I've been in a variety of different places. Central America, there's nobody quite like the people that I've ever met in Haiti. They have a joy. They have like a real joy, and it bothered me and it consumed me. And even as a high schooler, I was wrestling with that, even coming home. And I remember walking through my house and going, man, I have a fridge in my house. I've got air conditioning on at my house. I say my house, it was my parents' house. But I walked through going, man, look at all the stuff we have. Look at the roads that we just drove on, or the vehicles that we were in, or the couches that we sit on, or the beds that we sleep in. I started looking at all of these things, and the funny part about it for me, and the thing that kind of clicked and bothered me, if I'm honest, for years, was we have all of the stuff and all of the things and all of the equations that we should be the most joyful people on the planet if what we believe is right. That if we just get the right job, or if we just get the right retirement, or if we pick the right investment, or if we pick the right person or the right relationship, or have a family that we think is how a family is supposed to look, or if we can find a job with purpose, if we can create the perfect life, we have the best opportunity to do that right here in our country. And what's backwards and upside down is we are some of the most unhappy, unjoyful people in the world. Does that bother you? Here's why it bugs me. What if we live our entire lives thinking that it's just one more thing, one more job, one more relationship, one more win, and it still doesn't lead us to the place that we ultimately desire, which is true joy? My greatest fear is getting to the end of my life and looking back and saying, I missed it. I wasted it. I chased the wrong thing. Back down in Haiti, so crazy. You've got a bunch of us, rich Americans, going place to place, community to community, and we would show up and the people would be so excited, just like Danielle and Elena were describing. People would be so excited that we were there, that we came, that we had a relationship, that we wanted to get to know them, that we wanted to play soccer on the street, or we wanted to see where they worship, and we wanted to visit their church, or we wanted to see their family in different communities. They were so excited that we were there. And what little they had, at this point, the UN was distributing food. What they would do is they'd bring like Coca-Cola and Sprite, and then like the real stuff with the cane sugar in it. It was amazing. They would bring it and they would donate it to us. And to say no would have been disrespectful. So here we are, we're drinking what is extraordinarily expensive. I think what they were describing was one of those, one Coke or one Sprite was a day's wages. And the people who had nothing were giving it to us, and their faces were beaming. They had, I think, the thing that many of us desire. But they found it. It's in a totally different way. I think it's because of Jesus. It's because of the relationship that they have with Jesus. It's affected everything. Their families, their workplaces, their schools, their country. True joy is bigger than the circumstances that surround it. So here's what I would say with that one. I looked it up just because I wanted to define it. And it says this online: true joy is a profound sense of contentment and well-being that is not dependent on external circumstances. So it's not circumstantial. And in fact, it can even survive the worst of circumstances. Think about Christmas, right? What are we taught as kids? You go sit on Santa's lap and you do what? Here's what I want. This is what will make me happy. This is what I desire. I will experience joy if I get what I want. My kids have learned, you saw one of them a couple minutes ago, my kids have learned that dad hates the words I want. And it never gets you what you want. So they have to learn how to creatively manipulate me to get what they want. Figured that's more valuable. We're taught from an early age that if we get what we want, it will make us happy. And that's where we will experience joy. But Jesus demonstrated that joy can actually be found in the worst of circumstances. In the worst. I mean, it says this in Hebrews 12, verse 2, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and he sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. I can't help arrive at any other conclusion other than this one line or this one statement, and it's this: joy is a byproduct of pursuing Jesus. It's just a byproduct. Oftentimes we think joy is a byproduct of getting what we want and doing what we want and setting up the life in the way that we want. But Jesus demonstrated true joy is only found in him, that he looked at us. You know what moved Jesus to joy? God, who created all of the earth, all of the heavens, all of the universe. He created all the intricacies. I mean, everything from DNA to rocket ships and skyscrapers and love and personal relationships and houses. God created all of it. He's the maker of everything. But the one thing that God wanted, and it's the reason that we celebrate Christmas, the one thing he wanted was us. So much so that Jesus looked in the face of death, and he looked in the face of suffering and persecution. And it says, for the joy that was set before him, the joy that was found in a relationship with us, that's why he went and he endured the absolute worst. So as Jesus is hanging on a cross, what many of us would look at and say, there's the ultimate defeat. Jesus said, no, this is the ultimate victory. Because it was joy that led Jesus to the cross. It was joy that led Jesus to suffering. It was joy that led Jesus to the purpose of which he lived into, which was for us. And so the truth of the gospel and the truth of the Bible and the truth of the message that I'm trying to share today is that joy is not found in getting what you want. It's not found in building the life that you want. It's not found in a thing or some stuff or whatever you drive. Or joy is not found in a circumstance. Joy is found in a person, and his name is Jesus. And he already demonstrated that you're worth it, that you are what he wants, that you are what he desires. When the shepherds are out in the fields and the angels show up, they're about to make a proclamation. This is that part of the story. Luke 2, verse 8, that night there were shepherds staying in the fields nearby, guarding their flocks of sheep. Suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared among them, and the radiance of the Lord's glory surrounded them, and they were terrified. But the angel reassured them, don't be afraid. He said, I bring you good news that will bring great, say it with me, joy to all people. The Savior, yes, the Messiah, the Lord, has been born today in Bethlehem, the city of David, and you will recognize him by this sign. You will find a baby wrapped snugly in strips of cloth, lying in a manger. Good news led to great joy. You know the word for good news? You know what the word is? Gospel. They showed up to say, we have the greatest news that will cause great joy. Not just mediocre joy, not just that low-level joy, not even just happiness. No, we showed up to bring you good news. We showed up to bring you the gospel that leads to great joy. And here it is that the God who created the universe sees you, and he knows you, and he knows you bring nothing to the table. He knows your sin. He knows your brokenness. He knows your pain. He knows your past. He knows all the garbage that we try to hide from everybody else. Jesus knows every ounce of it. And he was so moved with love for us that the joy that was set before him, he worked his way to the cross, and he was nailed to it, and he died. It's why it's why God sent his son Jesus to us. It's to bring the gospel that apart from him, we can do nothing. Apart from him, we are nothing. But Jesus looked at us and desired us. And so he made the ultimate sacrifice so that we might have a relationship with him. And the angels set the table and they said, this is the good news. There's nothing you can do to earn it, but it's a gift that comes from God and it's a relationship with him. The gospel is you didn't earn it, but Jesus brought it. And the greatest joy you can experience is when you understand that God knows you, knows every part of you, and he still wants you, that he loves you. That regardless of the circumstances that exist in your life, whether they're perfect or whether they're awful, whether the diagnosis is in remission or it just came back, whether the relationship can't be restored or if it is restored, whether the person in your family that has left and walked out or renounced the family or whatever, or the person comes back. Regardless of the circumstances that are in front of you, joy is actually available. But it only comes through the person of Jesus. If I said it one more time, I would say it this way. Joy is a byproduct of pursuing Jesus. So my last question to you is just this. How are you pursuing Jesus? In this Christmas season, as we're heading into it, so many of us have the ideal. This is what I want. This is what would make me happy. This is what would bring joy. What if it's backwards? What if joy is available to you and it has nothing to do with everything else other than your relationship and your walk with him? Jesus made the first move. Now it's our turn. Whether you gave your life to him years ago, whether you've walked with him for decades, or whether you've never done that yourself, Jesus made the first move. And his promise is the good news of the gospel leads to great joy, which is what we desire. So I'd love to pray for us. I'd love to pray for you, especially. So Father, right now we just come before you and just, I know so many of the stories in this room, Lord, they're just hard. They're painful right now. A lot of it is loss. A lot of it is pain. A lot of it is brokenness. Stories right now where there aren't happy endings. There's not bows to be tied. Even getting closer to Christmas, Lord, oftentimes it seems like things ramp up in a totally different way, that the enemy goes after us in totally different ways, Lord. Whether it's anxiety or fear, whether it's relational tension or financial tension, whether it's stuff with work or year end. I know a lot of people in this room, Lord, it's also depression. There's just a longing for joy in this room. And so what I pray, Father, is that you don't answer our prayers for the next thing or the next relationship or the stuff that we think we will find joy in. I just pray right now that we would actually put you back on your seat of the throne room of our own hearts, that we would pursue you, and that our pursuit of you and our relationship with you, that joy would be a byproduct of that. And I just pray that this room, just even the next couple of weeks, that we would be able to understand the shepherds that were in the fields. We'd be able to understand Zechariah and Elizabeth or Mary and Joseph, that we would relate to them as normal, average human beings that you went after, that you had something for, that you had a gift for, and it was your son, Jesus. I pray that we would experience that gift today. And I pray that we would pursue that gift. Not joy at the expense of Jesus, but Jesus, which leads to joy. And pray this in Jesus' name. And all God's people said together, amen.